This is a very important topic, the difference between men and women sexually, and I don't think it's talked about nearly often enough. And that's why I think we have a huge dating problem in this country. A lot of men saying women are too masculine. I don't even want to date these women. Because when women are told to act like men, working, which is competition and heavy work, and having sex like men, which means like in porn, however the men want. And when we're told that our femininity is bad, it's a weakness, we are depriving ourselves of our actual humanity, and we're making ourselves less attractive to each other. And one thing that women do that removes them from their core authentic selves is following that kind of cultural narrative that we should be like men, and that's where the power is. Women who hook up are hurting themselves, and women who compete in the workplace, some women want to, but many women would rather have a balanced life, work part-time, and devote their lives to relationships and children and being mothers. Not all, but I do think it's good for some women to carry that sort of torchlight for motherhood, and to remind women that we're not like men sexually, and to teach men that we're not like men sexually. So if you see a woman who's just down to fuck, she's probably not enjoying it. I am going to be reading a little bit and giving my comments from this very classic book that I recommend to so many people, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution by Louise Perry. She also has a YouTube channel called Maiden, Mother, Matriarch, and I love that because those are the three phases of a woman's life. A maiden, then a mother, then a matriarch. And some women don't want to be mothers, and that's fine. I am definitely on the motherhood part of it, but you don't have to be. So let's talk about the sexuality part and how women are different from men. I'm going to be referring to the chapter Loveless Sex is Not Empowering. So first we're going to talk about the sociosexuality gap. Men and women are not the same, either physically or psychologically. Casual heterosexual sex inherently carries much greater risks for women, and in return for much meaner rewards. And yet the perfectly reasonable insistence that women should be allowed to fuck back without suffering criminalization or social ostracization slips all too easily towards the insistence that they therefore ought to. Sociosexuality, now I'm going to paraphrase, is the trait that determines a person's interest in sexual variety and adventure. Okay, so now I'm going to read what she says here. The standard questionnaire used by researchers to assess sociosexuality asks respondents the following questions. This is a long list. I'm going to read it slowly, and after each question, kind of think to yourself, what is true for you and what you think is true for other men or for other women. With how many different partners have you had sex within the past 12 months? With how many different partners have you had sexual intercourse on one and only one occasion? Hookup. How many hookups have you had? One night stands. With how many different partners have you had sexual intercourse without having an interest in a long-term committed relationship with this person? In other words, how many times have you had a one-night stand with someone that you would never have a relationship with? No interest in a relationship at all. Do you agree that sex without love is okay? Can you imagine being comfortable and enjoying casual sex with different partners? Do you only want to have sex with a person when you are sure that you will have a long-term, serious relationship? How often do you have fantasies about having sex with someone you're not in a committed romantic relationship with? How often do you experience sexual arousal when you are in contact with someone you're not in a committed romantic relationship with? In everyday life, how often do you have spontaneous fantasies about having sex with someone you have just met? Now, I can totally get the difference. I know the majority of men are totally down for these casual encounters because they're more sociosexual. If we plot them on a bell curve, the men are going to be far skewed away from the women. Now, there are going to be exceptions, and you may be one of those, but in general, women want sex in a committed relationship, and men are more down to, hey, it feels good, let's do it. Right? Worldwide, there is a significant difference in average sociosexuality between the sexes, with men generally much keener to sow their wild oats than women are. And that's totally okay. I am not shaming men. We love this about men. You are built this way. God made you this way. Okay? That doesn't mean that, but you still have to understand women and respect women. That doesn't mean you can just go around and do it, right? But it's okay that you have those desires and that you want that. There's a compelling evolutionary explanation for this difference, as the biologist Anne Campbell writes. Biologically speaking, men's investment is completed at conception, and they are free to move on to pastures new. But women, unlike men, are quality, not quantity specialists. Their investment is not limited to a few moments' pleasure. They are committed to the reproductive consequences, and women produce only a limited number of offspring. So great is the commitment demanded by every child that women's bodies and minds are exquisitely crafted to invest only in the highest quality child that they can produce. Although it's typical for men to invest a great deal of time and energy into offspring produced within a socially recognized relationship, like a marriage, men also have an alternative mode of sexuality in which they favor quantity of offspring over quality. That is, inseminating as many women as possible and not hanging around to deal with the consequences. This alternative mode is favored more by some individual men than others, depending on their degree of sociosexuality. If they're cads versus dads. But the difference is not absolute. Some men may be drawn more towards one sexual strategy than the other at certain points in their lives, or in certain situations, or with certain partners. There is remarkable flexibility within male sexuality that women are not always aware of, especially within a political environment that denies the existence of evolved psychological differences between the sexes. Now, she reminds us that sociosexuality differences is an average. There are some women who are very high in sociosexuality, and there are some men that are very low in it. So you can't know that for each individual person. So we're talking about in general. So individual exceptions to the rule do not negate the rule. For instance, the average differences in male and female sexuality become glaringly obvious when we look at the gay and lesbian communities. Lesbian women are remarkably keen on committed monogamy. The median lesbian woman in the UK reports just one sexual partner within the last year, and a majority report having known their sexual partners for months or years before they first had sex. Lesbian women are also significantly more likely than gay men to get married or enter into a civil partnership. In contrast, Sullivan describes the landscape of gay life as almost a painting in testosterone, and surveys on gay men's sexual behavior confirm this characterization, with casual sex very much more common in the gay community than in the lesbian community. In one representative survey from 2010, roughly a quarter of gay men report being just as stably monogamous as the average lesbian, while another quarter report more than 13 male partners in the past year, and a smaller minority report hundreds of sexual partners in their lifetimes, which is almost unheard of among lesbian women. The mean number of lifetime sexual partners among gay men is 6 and 8 times higher than straight men. Sexual behavior among gay men is an exceptionally good indicator of what happens when the limiting factor of female sexual preference is entirely removed. And I think that we ladies have to be proud of our selectivity. And again, that doesn't mean that there are men that are less worthy than other men. Like, we women have a certain preference that has to do with our own standards, our own emotional health, but also on who we have something in common with and connect with, right? Straight men's sexual preferences are constrained by the fact that when women are given a choice, they are generally much pickier than men and reject a much larger proportion of suitors. And then she refers to the study, which I'm sure we've all heard of. One study from 1978, since repeated with the exact same findings, and you can find this on YouTube on colleges when people try this, involved participants of average attractiveness approaching strangers of a similar age and propositioning them for sex. As the authors write, the great majority of men were willing to have a sexual liaison with the women who approached them. Not one woman agreed to a sexual liaison. Now, some feminists say that this is due to a sex-negative culture, and then women would suffer greater reputational damage if they're seen as too promiscuous, or that maybe these women wanted the proposition but had fear for their physical safety. But this does not pan out when we look at dating apps and websites, and we find that men and women differ dramatically in their baseline levels of sexual disgust. You can induce disgust. Disgust induces a physiological response that can be measured through heart and respiration rate, blood pressure, and salivation. And although the individual may not be aware of these indicators, studies find that on average, the sexual disgust threshold is much lower for women than it is for men. And I will just say that spitting is one thing. Like, men love to have their cock spit on. One woman wants her vulva spit on, for example. And women are more likely to say, ooh, I don't want this guy close to me. And men are more likely to say, ooh, I want her close to me. So, curiously, I am not aware of any word in the English language for a particular emotion that every woman to whom I've spoken has experienced at least once, but that the men to whom I've spoken don't seem to recognize at all. It is a combination of both sexual disgust and fear. The bone-deep, nauseating feeling of being trapped in proximity to a horny man who repulses you. I think for guys, if you could think of the fact that for me, as a woman who does like sex and all that, the average guy to me is like a 300-pound woman to you. That's how we see men, as a 300-pound woman. And they might be nice, they might be good to talk to, but do I want him touching me? That's how we feel. I think it's important for you to know this. The average man, even if he might be kind of attractive, say that you see a very attractive woman, but she's bed-shoveled and her hair is all unkempt and she stinks. She might be cute, but do you want her touching you? That's how the average man is to us. Just speaking to how it feels. And for us to want to be like, okay, I want you to touch me, you have to morph into kind of a prince through the way that you treat us and how we feel about you and how much we have in common with you. And I would say another way for men to think of this is, if you were only to have sex with a woman that you would marry or bring home to your mother, that's how we feel about having sex with you. That's probably better. Is like, in order to want to have sex with a man, we have to feel like we have to feel like this is a guy we would want to date or marry or have children with. Okay? So it would be like you feeling that way too, as a precursor to wanting sex. Yeah, that's the best way to explain it. Like, what do you need? How often do you feel that way about a woman, that I could see her as the mother of my children? I want to invite her to meet my family and my friends. How often do you feel that way about a woman? Not very often, and that's why we don't feel that way very often about a man. Can this person add to my life? Do I want this person to meet my family? Do I want to live with this person? Do I want to share my money with this person, my body with this person? So that's the biggest difference, really. Okay. So then she talks about sex buyers, which she says that sex buyers, by definition, are people who seek out sex outside of a committed relationship, usually with a person they have never met before. And this kind of sexual encounter is far more likely to appeal to people high in sociosexuality. People low in this trait are just not interested in having sex with a stranger and are certainly not willing to pay money to do so. The people exceptionally high in sociosexuality are overwhelmingly men, and the people low in it are overwhelmingly women. I can't say that fast 3 times. I had a hard time saying it once. This means that as a rule, any sexual culture that encourages women to fuck back will more often than not just encourage women to fuck themselves over. As far as the women who are the sex providers, if they're higher in sociosexuality, I can't speak to that. I don't know. And as far as the sex buyers, that's her opinion. I think a lot of the sex buyers are just men who are just desperately lonely in their marriages, or who do like sex, but they are between relationships. I don't think there are that many men who do participate in that. I think there are more men who actually go for watching porn or getting like a massage with a happy ending. I think there are more men who are likely to want that. But I don't know. Anyway, now we will continue. Now she's talking about dating and hookup culture. The whole heterosexual dating market has a problem, and it's not one that can be easily resolved. Male sexuality and female sexuality at the population level do not match. On average, men want casual sex more often than women do, and women want committed monogamy more often than men do. And that's a fact. I totally agree. Hookup culture demands that women suppress their natural instincts in order to match male sexuality and thus meet the male demand for no strings sex. Some women are quite happy to do this, but most women find it unpleasant or even distressing. Thus, hookup culture is a solution to the sexuality mismatch that benefits some men at the expense of most women. I propose a different solution based on a fundamental feminist claim that unwanted sex is worse than sexual frustration. I'm not willing to accept a sexual culture that puts pressure on people low in sociosexuality, overwhelmingly women, to meet the sexual demands of those high in sociosexuality, overwhelmingly men, particularly when sex carries so many more risks for women in terms of violence and pregnancy. Hookup culture is a terrible deal for women and yet has been presented by liberal feminism as a form of liberation. A truly feminist project would demand that, in the straight dating world, it should be men, not women, who adjust their sexual appetites. Yes, that's what I'm also talking about. A feminist view would demand that men, not women, adjust their sexual appetites. That's where we're the gatekeepers to sex, and I think that we as women have done a terrible job at the gatekeeping. Terrible job. Terrible job. Yeah, not impressed with the job that we have done. And because of that, I think we've lost, like by showing everything on Instagram and just parading around so naked. Like, a lot of men would prefer seeing a woman dressed or partially dressed. Like, we've lost our allure and mystique. Acting like gay men. Pretty much. Look at my body. That's what gay men do to other gay men. Look at my body, naked. It makes men not even want to date us anymore, I'm telling you. Okay, I'm just going to go through to some other parts I've underlined. That I could have probably read the whole chapter, but really that women who hook up, like here's a woman, Leah Fessler, who has written thoughtfully about her time as a student at Middlebury College, an institution in which hookup culture reigned and where abstinence seemed to be the only way in which a female student could avoid participating. Unwilling to commit to abstinence and celibacy, she convinced herself that emotionless sex was the feminist thing to do. And that's what a lot of women do. They're trying to have emotionless sex. And she did her best to ignore her unhappiness. Quote from her: "After I began having sex with these guys, the power balance always tipped. A few hookups in, I'd begin to obsess, primarily about the ambiguity of it all. My friends and I would analyze incessantly. Does he like me? Do you like him? He hasn't texted in a day. Read this text. I'm so confused. He said he didn't want anything, but keeps asking to hang out." With time inevitably came attachment, and with attachment came shame, anxiety, and emptiness. Louise Perry goes on to write that the worst thing for women at the college were the pseudo-relationships. Quote, "The mutant children of meaningless sex and loving partnerships. Two students consistently hook up with one another and typically own each other for weeks, months, even years, yet per the unspoken social code, neither party is permitted emotional involvement, commitment, or vulnerability. To call them exclusive would be clingy or even crazy." Wow. Okay. Fessler and her friends quietly admitted to each other that what they really wanted was true intimacy, public recognition of a relationship, an arm around the waist, a hand held in daylight. She wrote her senior year thesis on hookup culture at Middlebury College, and of the straight women who participate in her research, 100% of the interviewees and 3/4 of survey respondents stated a clear preference for committed relationships. Only 8% of the women who were presently in these pseudo-relationships reported being happy with their situation. Other studies consistently find the same thing. Following hookups, women are more likely than men to experience regret, low self-esteem, and mental distress, and most of the time they don't even orgasm. Female pleasure is rare during casual sex. Men in casual relationships are just not as good at bringing women to orgasm in comparison with men in committed relationships. In first-time hookups, only 10% of women orgasm compared to 68% of women in long-term relationships. This is partly a consequence of the fact that men who are familiar with their partner's bodies and sexual preferences are better placed to know what they want. But another factor is the so-called sexual script for casual encounters, which is more likely to prioritize male desire. We know that since the turn of the century, rates of anal sex and fellatio have been rising among young adults, while rates of cunnilingus have declined, likely a consequence of the influence of internet porn. Okay, so again, let me repeat that in my own words, that since the turn of the century, we have seen a decline in cunnilingus, which is a man going down on a woman. And we have seen an increase in fellatio, which is a woman going down on a man, and anal sex, which is a man penetrating a woman anally, or often called Greek. So it's what the men want is happening more, and what the women want, the woman's pleasure has declining priority. These sex acts are much less likely to result in female orgasm, with anal sex in particular usually offering pain without pleasure for anyone lacking a prostate. Oh, I didn't know this. So the guys do like a prostate massage for the prostate, and the anal sex does the same thing. It not only stimulates their the anal area, which has a lot of nerve endings, by the way, but also stimulates their prostate. One typical study has found that 30% of women experience pain during vaginal sex, 72% experience pain during anal sex, and, listen to this, large proportions do not voice discomfort to their partners. So they're having discomfort during sex and they're not saying anything. And I can relate. I have been in that situation myself often too. These figures don't suggest a generation of women reveling in sexual liberation. Instead, a lot of women seem to be having unpleasant, crappy sex out of a sense of obligation. Hookup culture is more common in environments in which men are dominant, and in a sexual marketplace in which such a culture prevails, a woman who refuses to participate puts herself at a disadvantage. Because on college campuses now, we have more women than men. So whenever we have more women than men, women compete with their sexuality. Male students on campuses have become a scarcer resource, so the balance of power is tipped towards them. And while women may run the clubs, dominate in classes, and generally define the character of the university, the law of supply and demand rules the social scene. That's why the women are both competitive in seeking men and submissive in lowering their standards. Today's young women are typically unaware that men are in general much better suited to emotionless sex and find it much easier to regard their sexual partners as disposable. Ignorant of this fact, women can all too easily fail to recognize that being desired is not at all the same thing as being held in high esteem. Okay, ladies, this is what women need to know, because it took me so long to figure this out. I didn't figure this out until I was in my 50s, you guys. That, I was married a long time. I guess it was for like a couple years after my divorce when I was exploring my sexuality, because I was in a very bad sex marriage. And I was exploring my sexuality, and I couldn't figure out why these guys would just like ghost me, or why they were so bad in bed. you know? And I had to also learn that men will have sex for different reasons than me. Men will have sex with me because they can, not because they like me or respect me or want to date me. And that took me a long time to figure out, and that's what women have to know, because when men want sex, they're not going to come at us like a predator. Like, they're still going to be nice. They're going to be respectful towards us. They still want to please us. But once they've had their sex, they're willing to move on. It's kind of like a woman babysitting the neighbor's kid or the dog. Like, you're going to be nice to the kid or the dog because you like them, you're a good person, but you want to give them back. You don't want to adopt the kid or adopt the dog. It's the same thing. It's hard for us to understand it because we're so different, but understand it we must. Understand it we must, ladies. It is up to us to be the gatekeepers of sex, because without the gatekeeping, when we're so porous, we're going to become harsh. We're going to become defensive. We're going to become aggressive and angry. Okay? That's why I think so many women are aggressive and they are angry, because it's not working to be like a man. They're angry. The only way about it is to realize why you're angry and to get back into, I may not get a man. They think they have to be that way to get a man, but at the cost of their own emotional health, really. So again, I'm going to repeat this. Today's young women are typically unaware that men are in general much better suited to emotionless sex and find it much easier to regard their sexual partners as disposable. Ignorant of this fact, women can all too easily fail to recognize that being desired is not at all the same thing as being held in high esteem. It isn't nice to think of oneself as disposable or to acknowledge that other people view you that way. Often it's easier to turn away from any acknowledgement of what is really going on, at least temporarily. I've spoken to a lot of women who participate in hookup culture when they were young, and only years later came to realize just how unhappy it made them. If you're a woman who's had casual sexual relationships with men in the past, you might try answering the following questions as honestly as you can. Did you consider your virginity to be an embarrassing burden you wanted to be rid of? Do you ever feel disgusted when you think about consensual sexual experiences you've had in the past? Have you ever become emotionally attached to a casual sexual partner and concealed this attachment from him? Have you ever done something sexually that you found painful or unpleasant and concealed this discomfort from your partner, either during sex or afterwards? If your score is 0, then congratulations. Your high sociosexuality and good luck have allowed you successfully to navigate a treacherous sexual marketplace. But if you answered yes to any of these questions, as I suspect you probably did, you're entitled to feel angry at a sexual culture that set you up to fail. Oh, now she's talking about the anger too. Yes, I think women are angry at the sexual culture and they're taking it out on men. But it's not men's fault that we have become so easy, that we have tried to compete with men in emotionless sex. It is not men's fault. It is our fault and the feminists who've led us astray. And I think we need voices like Louise Perry's and my voice and other women. We need to start speaking up against this. Doesn't serve us. And when I talk to men who are like going through a hookup phase and the kind of women they meet, those are not nurturing women. Women who are going through hookup phase are not nurturing. They're angry and they're guarded. And I will tell you, I endured a lot of emotional pain when I went through my hookup phase after my divorce. I did not know men would discard me and ghost me. I did not know that they would just see me as sexual and not even want to have sex with me again, let alone date me. Not that I was looking for a relationship with them, but I didn't like being ghosted. I did not know this, and it was extremely emotionally painful to me. And it made me think of men as selfish, as users of women. It made me a little bit cautious of men and not trusting men. And I had to work through that. And I had to find that, oh my God, I can't have emotionless sex. And, oh yeah, that's a good thing. It means I'm an emotionally healthy woman. It took me time to find that out. Because I was also going with the cultural narrative, and also because I wanted to explore my sexuality. If I would have met a man that I ended up in a relationship with, my path would have been completely different, and I wouldn't be making all these videos, you know? But I guess because I was hooking up with guys in their 20s, and a lot of the sex I had, I didn't even want to see the people again. Even the people that wanted to see me, I didn't want to see them again if they were like selfish in bed or bad in bed. But I would have much rather had one guy for a relationship than all these guys, to be honest. But through my experience, I tried to be like, well, how can I be like men and disconnect, like be all in and disconnect? Because that's what men do. They're very passionate and affectionate in bed, and then they disappear. And I tried to figure out how I could be powerful like that. Powerful. I wanted to be powerful like that. And I realized finally that I couldn't. And it took me a couple years, like I said, to own this as like a good thing about me and to like that about me. And it wasn't really until this book came out last summer, August of 2022, that I felt validated or understood, because until this book came out, I didn't hear any woman talking about how the hookup culture doesn't benefit women and how we're different from men. Then I started learning more about evolutionary psychology and things that women expect in men. And that again gave me validation as to what I wanted and to help me find my actual voice and what I actually wanted. Because I was trying to keep up with a narrative or a culture. I didn't have all the understanding and all the knowledge to go into it properly. So, I was one of these women myself, and that's why I'm so very passionate about this topic. And I think that is a reason that a lot of women get very callous. They have to find their way back. And to find their way back, I think they have to realize that don't try to be like men, and guard your sexuality as sacred. And my rule is to only have sex with men that I could see as the father of my children. Like if I were to have a child, and I'm way past childbearing age, but that's my criteria. Unless it was someone that I had in an appointment, let's say, okay? But for outside of an appointment situation, it would be, is this a man that I could see as the father of my children? Okay, in terms of what he adds to my life, how he would treat my kids, the kind of man he is. He would have to be a powerful man who is emotionally stable and successful and an original thinker, whatever I want. And what every woman wants is different, but is this a man who could be the father of your children? That should be the criteria for a sexual interaction. And the criteria for having intercourse without a condom is, are we in a committed relationship? Have I met his parents, or am I going to meet his parents? Okay, and I think when women start having this kind of standards, we can more honor what we really want in our bodies, and we don't have to be so angry with men, and then we will become more enchanting to men again. A man who wants to know us is not going to push us for sex either, because they want to get to know us. I've talked to men who are either looking for sex or looking for a wife. When they're looking for a wife, they will not push on the sex. They will wait. They want to get to know you. They want to respect you. They actually care about other parts of you other than your pussy. They're thinking about other things, like, can this woman add to my life? How are we going to live together? Do I like spending time with her? They're not just thinking with their dicks. They're also thinking with their hearts and their minds. So they are going to be not pushing for the sex. And when they have had sex with you, every boyfriend I've ever had, after the first time I had sex with him, he would say, when can I see you again? That's how you know that they want to go out with you and see you again, not just for another hookup. So that's kind of a good way to test if a guy's was even worth it. Like if you've had sex with a guy and then he's like, when can I see you again? They want to go out with you. That's a good sign. But if they're just like, oh, I gotta go, or see you around, you were just like a receptacle, a warm body, pretty much. This video is getting very long, but I'm going to keep going because I don't want to make this into 2 videos. Okay, now we're going to go into cads and dads. Take a little break here. While most women assess both their short-term and their long-term partners based on the same criteria, most men do not. A woman will typically look for identical qualities in a hookup as she does in a husband. As the evolutionary biologist David Best puts it, in both cases, women want someone who is kind, romantic, understanding, exciting, stable, healthy, humorous, and generous with his resources. In both contexts, women desire men who are tall, athletic, and attractive. Men, in contrast, tend to be very particular about the criteria they look for in a potential spouse, but much less so when seeking out casual sex. That's what I said before also, that in a hookup, we want the same things in that man that we would want in a relationship. But men don't. When it comes to a relationship, men are just as picky as women are in sex. Get that? When it comes to a relationship, men have all these criteria they want, and those are the same ones that women want just to have sex. Sherry Argoff, author of the best-selling dating advice book, Why Men Love Bitches, puts it frankly. What men don't want women to know is that almost immediately they put women into one of 2 categories: good time only or worthwhile. And the minute he slides you into that good time only category, you'll almost never come back out. Absolutely true. Absolutely. There is a straightforward scientific reason for the existence of these 2 categories. It is hard to dissuade men out of their instinct to care about what evolutionary biologists call paternity certainty. Men in cat mode aren't concerned with the welfare of their unknown offspring, since they're favoring quantity over quality. But men in dad mode care a great deal and will often devote their lives to providing for their families. But dad mode carries a significant cost in the form of jealousy. In our evolutionary history, men who unwittingly devoted themselves to raising children not genetically related to them were at a selection disadvantage, while those who practiced what biologists call mate guarding, behaving jealously, could be certain that the children were their own. The sexual double standard is the result of this mate guarding instinct. As with all other features of our evolutionary heritage, there is room for flexibility here. Plenty of men and women are utterly devoted to their adoptive or stepchildren, regardless of their genetic link. And a surprisingly high proportion of men privately express a sexual interest in cuckolding, which may seem confusing within a strict evolutionary framework. When looking for a long-term partner, anonymous surveys suggest that the vast majority of straight men prefer to choose a wife with a limited sexual history and little interest in casual sex, past or present. Women also prefer a husband who is not unusually promiscuous, but their preference is not as strong, and most are willing to accept a man who has historically enjoyed casual sex but has since settled down. Importantly, however, men generally don't mind a more extensive sexual history when they're looking for a hookup, or what Sherry Argoff would call a good time only partner. Then, in fact, promiscuity may increase the appeal. With a high sexual disgust threshold, a natural instinct in sexual variety, no personal risk of pregnancy, and no fear of slut-shaming, casual sex offers men a cornucopia of delights that are difficult to resist, and the liberal feminist narrative of fucking back provides comfort for any man whose conscience might trouble him. With hookup culture experience established as normative, both men and women are funneled into patterns of behavior that are grimly complementary. Men are encouraged into cad mode, pursuing temporary relationships that offer all of the pleasures of cheap sex and none of the responsibilities of commitment. Meanwhile, women compete with each other for short-term male sexual attention, may well win it, but in a form liable to induce shame, anxiety, and emptiness. Just like their female peers, men may not consciously realize that this is what they're participating in. And in one sense, who can blame them? Teenage boys are raised on pop culture that presents having sex like a man as the ultimate form of female sexual empowerment, and in the point to which they're typically exposed from childhood, women are shown begging men for painful or degrading sex acts. When young men start having sex offline, they will likely encounter women, themselves schooled by porn and pop culture, who hide their distress, fake their orgasms, work hard to avoid catching feelings, and in all other ways strive to be what Gillian Flynn has famously described as the cool girl, the woman who is above all hot. She's hot and understanding. Cool girls never get angry. They only smile in a chagrin-loving manner and let their men do whatever they want. Go ahead, shit on me. I don't mind. I'm the cool girl. We should hardly be surprised when, after all this, many men assume that women really don't mind being relegated to good time only. And then, I'm going to skip some parts. These men, she's quoting some things from a subreddit where women are disappointed by men who don't want to date them. Here, I'll just read one. This is a guy who wrote on a subreddit. I have been seeing my friends with benefits, Kara, for a while now, almost 8 months. We used to work together. Now, before you guys ask, no, she does not have a crush on me or emotionally likes me. She has been single for a while and wants a guy similar to me, if that makes sense, has a decent career and is in decent shape. Now, honestly, I think she's punching too high when it comes to a relationship. I told her that she should focus less on physical traits like looks and be willing to look past them when dating guys. She asked me if I was telling her to lower her standards, and I was like, sort of. She got super offended. Wow. This guy's... I really get harsh on guys who are in friends with benefit situations, because I know women don't like that. And these guys are totally oblivious to it. And these women don't like it, I'm telling you. If you're in a friends with a benefits situation with a woman, I'm judging you. I'm judging the women as not being empowered yet. They should read this book. And I'm judging the men as taking advantage, because these women would want to date you. 90% certain. These men seem to be genuinely bewildered by the fact that the women they have been having sex with for many months are unhappy in these pseudo-relationships. And the women seem to have drifted into this arrangement, not realizing how little regard their partners have for them. This is a tragedy of mutual incomprehension. And I think a lot of these women think, if I keep having sex with him, maybe he'll eventually ask me to be his girlfriend or take me on dates. That's what the women are really thinking. Most of them. However, I cannot help but harbor a sneaking suspicion that many men, perhaps all, do realize that operating in cat mode is not actually harmless. Male readers who have ever had heterosexual casual sex might like to ask themselves these questions. Okay, guys, this question is for you. If you've had casual sex, these questions are for you. 4 questions. Have you ever had sex with a woman you'd be embarrassed to introduce to your friends? Have you ever failed to contact a woman after sex? Have you ever suspected that your casual partner was becoming emotionally attached to you and failed either to commit to or break off the relationship? Have you ever encouraged a woman to do something sexually even though she showed reluctance? The answer to all these questions ought to be no, but a culture of casual sex incentivizes men to do such things, and generally with no social penalty. If anything, men who fuck and chuck good time only women can often expect to increase their social status among their male peers, at least in the short term. Casual sex harms women most of all. Unless you're in the small minority of women who are exceptionally high in sociosexuality, the risks of casual sex are going to outweigh the benefits. Being alone with an unknown horny man will always be somewhat dangerous for any woman given the differences in size and strength. And although it's of course true that husbands and long-term boyfriends also commit domestic violence, there's no reason to do away with the vetting process altogether. It's better to date men that are already part of one's social network, because if they've developed a reputation for treating their girlfriends badly, you're likely to hear about it through mutual friends. When you date a stranger from the internet, the only person who can give you information about his sexual history is the man himself, and his account is unreliable. What's more, there is nothing stopping him from treating his date badly and then melting back into the night, having suffered no social consequences whatsoever. Mutual friends and acquaintances can punish bad behavior, dating apps can't. The fact that a man wants to have sex with a woman is not an indication that he wants a relationship with her. Holding off on having sex for at least the first few months is therefore a good vetting strategy for several reasons. Firstly, it filters out the men who are just looking for a hookup. Secondly, it gives a woman time to get to know a man before putting herself in a position of vulnerability. Thirdly, avoiding the emotional attachment that comes with the sexual relationship makes it easier to spot red flags. Free from the befuddling effects of hormones, it's possible to assess a new boyfriend's behavior with clearer eyes. And finally, if he wouldn't make a good father, don't have sex with him. Again, I so much love this book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. I hope you got a lot out of it. Please pass along this video to people or get the book. You can take screenshots of this book to send to people, recommend this book to people. I think that every single person or any person having sex outside of a relationship should definitely read this book. I'm a huge fan of this book. As you can see, I spent like over 50 minutes making a video on it. And this knowledge absolutely has to get out. Like, she made so many core powerful points, and that is a feminist viewpoint. The feminist viewpoint is loving towards men and acknowledges their sociosexuality, yet doesn't try to compete with it or match it. The feminist viewpoint is about women being who we want to be. Whether you're a tomboy or you're a girly girl, it's like, what do I really want and what really serves me? And understanding our sexual differences and honoring them and celebrating them. And that's what makes men and women attractive to each other, frankly. One important thing I want to add to this too is that vulnerability and submissiveness, true submissiveness and authenticity and vulnerability can only come about with healthy boundaries, because boundaryless people don't know what they want. And I think that the feminists have encouraged women to lose their boundaries, to mold them into what they should be or what they should want. If we really, really, really go into what we actually want, I think a lot of people haven't even really found that voice, So this would be an invitation, just to reflect on what you heard from this book from Louise Perry, and reflect on, what are your boundaries? What is it that you want? And what really is in the best interests of women when it comes to sex. This part was mainly against hookup culture. This is not about having sex in a relationship. I know there's a separate issue of in a relationship, the women are withholding sex from the men. That's a different topic. that I've made other videos about. If you go to my website, thetreasurewithincoaching.com, you will also see a blog post I made about maintaining female desire in a long-term relationship, because I believe that men do want sex, and I like to honor their need for having sex in a relationship. And there are things that men and women need to be aware of in a relationship so that they can enjoy each other sexually and not feel like they don't want it. That's a separate topic. This is more about hookup culture. And this book is the case against a sexual revolution. And so a first step is to just like honor what women really want and what really serves women in hookup culture. And hookup culture does not benefit women at all. We were sold a lie. And thank you for watching my video.